night and the first seconds took their sweet steps into this strange and wild year. And after sitting through dozens of discussions centered around today's topic, focused on monetizing virtual and hybrid events, you might be inclined to believe that this one is just like all the rest, that it's one more webinar, one more passive moment to listen to people guess about what works and what doesn't. And lest you believe that's the case, I am here to tell it to you straight. That's not what's going to happen here today. I promise you. Our guest, Chloe Richardson, she's the owner of Acier Events and head of sales at Giant Health. And Michael Leahy, he is the VP of sales for Informatech. They're here to answer my questions and yours. And I would encourage you to type those into the question box. I see all of you over there in the live discussion. Beautiful. You're doing a great job. So our panelists, Chloe and Michael, they've been working to make virtual events profitable, and they have been succeeding. They have examples, they have strategies, and they have strong opinions. And if you follow them on social media, you know what I'm talking about. Now, they may or may not always agree, but they're going to tell it to you straight. They're going to tell you like it is, no doublespeak, no dancing around, the real deal. I'm Kiki L'Italien, editor-in-chief of Association Chat. I'm the CEO of Amplify Growth, and I'm your moderator for this session. And so I'd like to start off with a question to provide context for our focus today. Now, technology is helping humanity to do everything from shop to see the doctor virtually, in-person meetings that had to jump to virtual solutions early on during the beginning of the global pandemic. They were at a disadvantage because they hadn't had time to prepare. So as we head into October of 2020, I'm going to ask my panelists, what do you think are the biggest challenges for monetizing virtual and hybrid events? And Chloe, I want to start with you.
Hi, Kiki. Thank you very much. Lovely introduction. So that's a really good question, I suppose, because as you say, we have developed quite quickly from where we were 6 months ago to where we are now. And we've all had a bit of trial and error. We found our feet in terms of how we can do virtual events. So what are the problems now? And there are two main problems that I have found, particularly recently, and quite controversially. The first problem is customer confidence, because we all know now there are plenty of platforms in place. There are plenty of digital and virtual event suppliers that can provide us with the tools we need to monetize and to create revenues and sponsorship opportunities for our customers. The problem is our customers don't want to get involved as much as we maybe expected them to at this stage. So that's the first problem. And the second problem, and I am sorry to everybody out there who is in this position, it's our sales teams, because they are so scared of reaching out and believing that this product is as good as it would have been if it was face to face, that they're already preparing themselves before even having a conversation and almost setting expectation that I'm not going to close this because I know digital events aren't as engaging. But that's not true. So if the sales team don't believe it, the customer's going to know instantly they don't believe it. And so I think it's the attitude and the mindset of both the internal teams and the consumer. And that's the problem I think we're at now, slightly controversially.
Oh, yes. I love this too.
Yeah, Chloe, I mean, I think I would agree with you to a level. I mean, one of the things that I write down and talk to the sales organization is confidence, and talking through that it's not the same thing. It definitely isn't, but there are a lot of value, and sometimes on some levels, even greater value at a lower cost than what physical and live events can afford for somebody. And so you're right, with the sales team saying having confidence in your product, in your audience, in the attendees, and the value that you're bringing, is a really important key to this, to selling and winning within the virtual event space.
So why do you think it's such a challenge? Because I know, as the sales team's reaching out and they're having these discussions, they are, they're probably skittish. They're hearing a lot of pushback from people, that they are. But what do you think beyond that? I mean, why is this still such a problem?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So within our organization, we have groups that sell both digital products as well as event products. And so the people who've been selling virtual events and digital programs, white papers, community engagement, they have no problem with this. They think this is just another really amazing evolution in what they're being able to sell and value they're able to provide these technology clients. I think the events people who are legacy physical events, who are used to selling square feet on an expo floor, I think they're the ones who need a little bit more of a confidence boost as it comes to this. But we've been able to walk through kind of a playbook, help get them up to speed on it, and then help educate their contacts. Because the other thing is some of the marketers we're talking to are also people who are used to buying booth space, and that's what they know as well. So I wrote down on some of the challenges are also just previous bad experiences with virtual events. People say we've done that before and it doesn't work for us, or we don't like it. So we've spent a lot of time within my group working on playbooks and education to marketers to understand that they are different, but there's some advantages to that as well. It's not just to the negative.
Yeah. Actually, can I just add to that? I think Mike's hit the nail on the head there with a bad experience. Therefore, they've written off all virtual events. And actually, that's so human, isn't it? We all do that right at the start. If we've tried something once, we tried a bad aubergine, we didn't like it, we say we don't like aubergine. And in fact, maybe it was just the aubergine wasn't cooked properly. So I think once you've tried 2 or 3 aubergines, you might start to think, you know what, actually, maybe I don't mind aubergine. Maybe it works for me. So I think Mike's totally right. It's a bad experience. And as it's so new, people retreat and say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go back to live. So that's a really big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, how much of it is that pushback where people just are tired of, you hear about Zoom fatigue and these types of things. How much of it is just, it's not so much the event itself, it's the situation that we find ourselves in the world. I mean, you're in a way, are we fighting not just the virtual event experience, but also everything else that's going on?
Yeah, I don't know, Chloe, I can jump in on that real quick. I think it's true, but I also think that events and digital marketer for tech companies, whatever companies your industry represents, they're doing a lot of this because this is what they're doing. I think for the attendees and the consumers and the people that are at the show, they don't necessarily feel that same way. I get it that it exists. I'm not saying Zoom fatigue doesn't exist, but maybe they're going to 2 of these, 3 of these, 4 of them in a year, and they still had that week circled on a calendar that I'm going to go learn and increase my own education, my knowledge base. I'm going to network with people. That's still important to them. And so I think being able to have a platform for that to happen is there's incredible value to that. And I think marketers do need to kind of come along with that. Because I think sometimes, to Chloe's point, salespeople can be a hindrance with their confidence. And sometimes even just the marketers you're working with, they will undervalue what you can bring with a virtual event.
I think with the Zoom, sorry, Kiki, just to add to Mike's point about the Zoom fatigue, I don't think people are getting Zoom fatigue. I think people are getting content fatigue. And I think there's a key difference because actually you find when you get off a Zoom call and you've been engaging and you've been chatting and asking questions, you really feel like you've got something from the session. You don't feel like you've been on a Zoom call. The problem is you wouldn't go to a face-to-face exhibition and spend all day sat in a theatre watching content. And that's the problem. We are finding ourselves having all this information thrown at us, not having the opportunity to speak, and therefore becoming disenfranchised and disengaged. And that, I think, is the problem. And I think at the start, the easy way was to throw content at events, digital and virtual events, to try and appease those that would normally have attended as an exhibitor. And I think in actual fact, it needs to be a bit more engaging than just speaking content. Mike?
Right. I think to be specific, though, Chloe, I think I agree with you, but to be specific, I wouldn't drop the amount or level of content. You just have to add the other element. So it's not that there's too much content, because what we've found in all the pricing and all those kinds of conversations, having a lot of high quality content is really what drives a lot of the purchasing decision for people who are going to pay to attend your virtual event. So that is there. But what we have found, and you're 100% right, is that having those sessions, those a Zoom, a roundtable, a breakout, we've done things where we even had links to aquarium feeds or puppy cams or something like you mentioned, to kind of step out of a session and get a little bit of a mental break, other ways to network and talk with folks. So I don't want people to come out and say less content. It's definitely keep your high quality and content, but make sure that you add in those other parts.
Yeah,
So,
I think you're right. And I think maybe it's a case of people were panicking where there was an empty gap and maybe throwing in less relevant content or very
Sure.
vague content that wasn't specific to a niche or a community. So people find they're watching so many things that they can't actually relate to. So yeah, it's exactly as Mike says. I think it's, you need to add something else, be more diverse, have more opportunity rather than just seminars and things like that. We want to get involved, right? We want to feel like we've got a purpose. And that's what digital events are harder to do, but we can do it. So
yes.
find that purpose.
So we're talking a lot about how the formatting can help, how we can add sort of a mental palate cleanser, if you will, and to provide some space for other types of engagement so that people aren't just sitting passively. Can we talk about the sales and pricing strategies behind some of this? Because I know that people are thinking about, oh my God, the money, the numbers, the profit margins. Where do we begin? What should I be following? And Chloe, you had said something in a previous discussion that we had about sales statistics showing that virtual can actually be better for overcoming objections, sales objections. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So as in when we're talking about when an organizer is trying to sell to an exhibitor or a sponsor, those are objections. Yeah. So there are quite a few obvious sales objections that we've all come across over the last 6 months in terms of why people don't want to go virtual specifically. Things like, we don't have the time, it's not as engaging, the ROI isn't as good, which none of those are true, by the way. But what it does is, if you go back to the objections we were used to hearing 6 months, 12 months, 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of those objections don't exist anymore. And they've been replaced with these new objections. So, for example, you used to hear a lot that actually the people that are attending the event aren't my target audience. They're just here to get free pens. We used to get that all the time at an event. Whereas now, the people who are watching your content are not only really engaged with what you have to say, but they've made an effort to be there, and they're not watching it for the freebies at the end. They're watching it because it's of genuine interest and they are a genuine buyer. So Mike was saying that they've seen specialist content sessions have increased that ROI potential and increased those leads and increased those contracts. That's because people watching want to watch. Whereas before, you'd get so many people at an event who were literally just coming to fill up their bag of whatever swag they could get. And that's part and parcel, I think, of a live trade show. So that, I think, has eliminated that particular objection a lot. And another one it's eliminated, pretty obvious, but I think it's quite important when we're talking about revenue and money for our customers, is it takes away the accommodation and travel costs that so many of us here are a reason why people don't want to exhibit with us in the first place. So actually, you've halved the price, you've got an increased level of engagement. So really, in theory, actually, it's far more engaging than a face-to-face event might have been.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, and I know there's a bunch of kind of questions in the stream about specifically around packages, but on this one, we've always used and generally been validated from exhibitors at our shows. There's generally about a 3x or a 4x cost of what they would pay for a sponsorship of a booth and what their all-in cost would be. And so you're right. Setup, drayage, carpet, all that stuff is wiped out as far as costs for this goes. And so there's a different cost of entry. But I also think when we're building these packages, you're kind of mapping it back to the still ROI. So there is still people, time involved in this. There's setup if you're doing it right, content that needs to be created, speakers, sessions being recorded. So it is still intense as far as what you need to do to prepare for it if you're doing it right. But you do save that price. It's a very good point. You do save that. But I have found, we have come across the objection that people do feel like there is less value. Like you mentioned, that what we call the lobby con, like just meeting people in a hallway, going to reception, that networking. Usually when we, across all of our events, when we survey our attendees of why they go to a show, number one is usually that personal development, learning, understanding, just being better at my job because you're going to some sort of industry. But two, almost always, is networking. They do want to meet other people. And so there is a tremendous amount of value to that part. And so I think what we're really trying to figure out is how that exists now in this virtual world and how to replace that and how to still give people that value kind of in a different format.
I think sorry, Kiki. Sorry
That's okay.
I think just following on from what Mike said as well, and probably another objection that I think has been made relatively easier for the salespeople now in organizers is that we can now produce so many more tangible metrics. So Mike was obviously talking about ROI there. Yeah. We can present that ROI in a lot of an easier and more effective way because we have everything measured. We have all the data, we have all the minutes, we have all the engagement levels, which you don't actually get in such depth when you do a face-to-face event. Sure, you know a couple of people pass this way, that way, and obviously the tech is building so you can actually catch how many people walk past the stand. But actually, you can see who's visited your profile. You can see how long they've stayed at a seminar. That kind of stuff doesn't exist in the physical world. So it's a really interesting way to sell a virtual event to a customer, to an exhibitor.
I mean, I hear so many, one of the biggest complaints that I hear from people, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, or if it's just that they're really, they in particular love the story of, say, how as an exhibitor, they bought someone a beer at the bar and it ended up becoming a big sale, you know? And I wonder, how many of those did you actually do, though? How many of those stories do you have compared to what's possible with some of this other information that you're bringing in? And so I'm not sure if the anecdotes are accurately portraying past opportunity or not.
Well, I think I would just, to me, one of the notes that I have that I worked very closely with our sales team on is you do have to be careful, and we actually advised against trying to say that it is the same thing. Like if you try to sell this as this is the same thing, you're going to get all these things, it's just online. I think you're doing it wrong. I think you're missing the point, because I think you do have to kind of downplay some of the annoyances of traveling and getting to a show while playing up some of the benefits, like you mentioned, of what you can get at the show, some of that tracking. And, at our live event, we have physical limitations on how many people can fit in a session room. You just do. And we saw that the sessions for a number of our events that sponsors were hosting and running the content on were 3, 4, 5x what happened in the physical event. And so there was a tremendous amount of value. And if you kind of try to unlock some of the benefits of what a virtual platform can provide you, you're right. You can really think through some of the higher value on some things within it.
Yeah, that's totally right. I think they are different, but they're both valuable. So it's just about finding how it's valuable for your clients. And Kiki, just to talk about your beer analogy.
Yes.
I've got an opinion on this. So I've been working in sales for, Mike's like, yeah, of course she's got an opinion.
I know.
I've been working in sales for so long. And let me tell you, I have never A, drunk a beer or B, drunk a beer with a client ever. Because as far as I'm concerned, and this isn't just in the events world. Well, yeah, I haven't done that either with cucumber or without, Mike. No alcohol. But I think it's not just, this isn't just the events industry. This is sales as a rule for every industry and forever. It's an old boys technique that you get drunk with your clients. We all know that has traditionally been how sales have been done for decades. Thank goodness we are using different ways now to actually get sales done, because it shouldn't be about those extra sort of beers that you have at midnight. Sociable elements are really important. And I think for growth of a relationship, it is key for long-term partnerships. However, I think seeing that as a sales tool is old-fashioned, and I don't really support it, because I think you can do sales, and I always have, without feeling the need to sacrifice that sort of professionalism, I suppose, in a way. So I'm sure people have done deals over beer, but I think as time goes on, it'll be less frequent. You're
100% right. I mean, in any new course, books, challenges, anything that you read on sales strategy, social selling gets you only so far, and it's not a long-term strategy. It's not a good one. And you're right. You probably can come up with a good anecdote or a good story, but it's certainly not anything you would ever base your sales strategy around.
Right.
Yeah, and also social selling now, is so much of it is online, and it will, and it has been before the pandemic kicked in, because it's the way that we socialize now is online. So if we could do it with our Facebook,
I would separate that, Chloe, from the get a beer with someone at midnight versus the just that in-person relationship building. There's an importance to that, and I do think that there is that. I would put that more into the category of networking.
I agree.
Same thing as stopping by someone's booth, or catching someone at lunch. It's the same type of a thing. There are some of those networking and that social part of it. But I would agree that I think within the events industry that grab a beer thing is very overstated.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also not specialist. Sorry, Kiki. It's not specialist in the event industry, because every industry likes to socialize. Mm-hmm. We've all done it. So it's kind of like we need to stop using that as an excuse for why we can't sell, because people who sell phones or people who sell makeup or people who sell anything are struggling with losing that, but they're managing to find ways to sell online. So surely we should do the same, right?
And I would say, Kiki, kind of segueing back to some of the packages on this, I mean, what we found is that there are those experiential things that you can still do online. You know, like we said, we've had DJ sessions, right? I mean, in one of our shows, DJ Questlove did a 20-minute session that there was a private link that people could go off and watch, you know, at the end of the day. Puppy cams, things just take a break, giveaways, passports. We still did physical swag bags, like where you could sign up, get something that people would mail you either before it started or just post-event that you would be able to still get, you know, a water bottle, a charger, some of those things that make some sense with that. I would say the other thing is we tried to pull off like wine tastings, where if you sign up early, you'd get mailed or you'd get a list, right? Go to your local store, buy these 4 wines that are readily available pretty much anywhere where you're at. And we're going to have a sommelier walk you through them and talk through them, right? Or we did it where we actually would mail those wines to you, you know, pre-show. And so there's kind of that still networking fun thing. Other people did a cooking class, right? Go get these 6 ingredients. And at the end of the day, jump on this Zoom line and we're going to do, you know, kind of talk through a new recipe and things like that. So there are definitely creative, experiential things that you can still do and accomplish even in the virtual world.
Yeah, I've been goat yoga, all kinds of stuff that's been out there that has just really been capturing a lot of
You have to get your own goat. They don't say
we'll bring you a goat,
and
you know, a goat for everyone.
Yeah.
People in the chat are saying that they love your opinion, Chloe. They're really responding well. We have had a lot of questions about those sponsorship packages.
Yeah.
So before we get off of this topic and talk about this, finding the sweet spot for pricing, I want to just dive just a little bit more into that sponsorship package question. You know, what is working? What's a good approach when you're looking at sponsorship packages that tends to be working well for people?
Yeah, I'll kind of talk through our journey, because I think there are kind of 2 paths to this. One that what we kind of just completed, and one that we're kind of starting right now. One was converting a large exhibitor base and the dollars that we had set for a physical event that we had to subsequently convert to the virtual version of this show. And in all honesty, part of it was, let's throw everything we have that we know we can monetize on a list and then start to devise some packages from that way. So we were a big believer of the kind of premium metal sponsorship. So the diamond, platinum, some of these things a lot of people have seen. And our top level sponsorship basically included, you know, high visibility, top listing on things, branding where you could get it, speaking sessions, roundtables, breakouts, like anything that we could think of that we could monetize, you could track, more access with people in their booths, which means more meeting times, you know, all that kind of stuff. You got that highest level of that. And when we priced them, the other thing that I think is the big thread of conversation on this is leads and guaranteed leads and cost per lead and that kind of conversation, because that is it can be a little bit of a mess. I mean, what we did was we looked at what we really thought was realistic for attendance at our show. Because for us, you don't want to leave anything on the table. At a live event where you have a history of what you've done before, you can under-promise and over-deliver, and people will be happy with it. In setting these packages, you really want to kind of find that line of what just barely makes you uncomfortable on leads and expectations, because you can't monetize it afterwards. There really isn't a lot of way to say, we said 500, but we bought 5,000. Like, you missed your opportunity to price that back when you started launching this. So you try to find that level of what's an accepted guaranteed lead number that you would get, and try to get that number right there. And then we would also just kind of cross-reference them, because we have a whole online digital business. And so we generally know what people are looking for a filtered lead and what that cost per lead is. And depending on filters and all that, they're anywhere from $30 to $120 per lead. So you just wanted to make sure that math worked out in the end. We never really sold it as, it's $50,000 and you get 1,000 leads. That's not how we sold it, but marketers do that math pretty quickly and upfront. They're going to say, what's my cost per lead on this? And so you at least have to have that answer and that story to them. But then, you know, you take out certain things. So you get less people, less lead guarantees. You go down to your next package. Maybe only your top 3 packages have a speaking session. You know, the lower ones, we even did away with lead guarantees. Hey, if you're just in for that lowest level, welcome, but you get what you get. And so it kind of takes some of that pressure off of you on the back end on delivery as well.
Chloe, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, Mike has done a really good job of transitioning events that were physical into kind of a virtual model for the interim or for however long that's required. So he's done a really good job with that. Most of the events I've worked on have always been virtual events because they've been new this year. So they've been launches. So it's slightly different with those guys because they don't have the exhibitors who are saying every 5 minutes, oh, but we're so used to face-to-face, things like that. So actually what you're able to do is you're able to compile packages because you're starting from a fresh, I suppose, you've got a clean slate. So you're able to give packages really based on those tangible metrics, like Mike was saying. And that's what's been really useful, I think, in increasing value. But it's not only that, for both groups, for both those who used to be physical and will be again, and for new events, I think this is a really good time for our sponsorship packages to reflect the things that our exhibitors wanted to do before that we weren't giving them. So there's, Mike, you might have had the same, for years and years I've heard on site, we want access to our community and our customer base 365 days a year. And as exhibition organizers, we didn't have time. It wasn't a priority for us to set this up because we were already making money from the square feet, right? But what this has done is this has meant that as organizers, we've realigned and we've been able to produce a product where they can promote themselves for 365 days a year to all of their community. And actually the value in that is huge. So I think it's a case of making sure that you really explain that in your sponsorship packages, that it's not just about those few days. Actually, you're getting something that's a year-long collaboration, I suppose is the word.
Yeah, and I think, you know, people talked about kind of quality, quantity, and all that, and I think we were really trying to honestly get both. And so the kind of the hierarchy, the structure of this was, you get people who have outreach to you in your booth, set a meeting, they've had a one-on-one with you, like they've come out to you and you've been able to connect with them and possibly have a meeting within the platform. The other one is people who have just downloaded some things, looked at some things, and also went to your session. Like a lot of the top level sponsorships, and this is something that we found kind of real time and are really working on as we're building packages for next year, is the speaking sessions for sponsors that you put on your agenda were incredibly well received. Attendees went to them in big numbers. Sponsors got a ton of really qualified leads. And I figured it was Chloe or Kiki mentioned it. It's like they're opting in to talk to you about a specific topic. Like it's an incredible, valuable lead for a sponsor with their sponsored sessions. And we had some sessions that were 800, 900 people in a sponsored session, you know? And it's like, it's a huge number of leads and quality leads, I would say. And then you kind of go down from there. People that came by your sponsor page, people that looked something up, people that registered but didn't go, you know, that's kind of that third tier that maybe help with your quantity that obviously are a little bit lower quality, but they're at the Black Hat show. So they're already self-qualifying to some degree, right? It's not just a consumer event that you don't know who's walking by. And ours, they're at least qualified enough that they registered for and came to that show, whether they went to your actual session or not.
So I had a question over here about one of the biggest feedback points I've had, and this is Amanda's question. One of the biggest feedback points I've had is that virtual booth traffic is a lot lower as they don't have to go to the exhibit hall for their coffee, etc. Any tips for driving traffic to virtual booths?
I've got a quick one, Mike, if you mind me jumping in.
Yeah, go for it.
So what I saw, which I really liked on one event, was that every single exhibitor had to supply something to the attendees, whether that was a coupon, whether that was an offer, whatever that may be. And in order to get that offer, the attendees had to visit their stand and click the little button on their virtual stand, and it would then upload onto their computer. And that for me was brilliant because the attendees knew about it, they wanted to do it, they were interested enough in what this freebie was that they were willing to go to all these stands to find out more. And that kind of, I think, doesn't replace, but slightly replicates that idea of getting the passing traffic from coffee or the bathroom or that kind of thing.
Well, and we had a bit of a learning curve in this as well. So I have a couple of actual solutions and things that we did that I think worked, but I think more philosophically, when we were talking about this to exhibitors, what we're explaining to them is that you really want to spend your time focusing on those high quality people, the people that come to your booth and set a meeting. That's for sure who you want to be spending your time on. That's the real meat of this. And so, yeah, those people that came to get a pen and you scan their booth, they're important. They're definitely part of the value of what you have. But if that day you have a certain amount of staff and a certain amount of hours, you should be worrying about the people who came to your session and wanted to engage with you and start a meeting. And so educating the sponsors to keep that as a concern, but not prioritize it too far. Because we did also then have lots of programs. We did, the swag bag or tchotchke type thing where if you hit these 8 sponsors, you get, something. And so you had to go around and either, I think it was bookmark or depending on the platform technology, some way that you can track that they did it or accomplished it. To be honest, when I mentioned the DJ Questlove, that was one you had to go to the booth to do something to get that link, right? So it wasn't a published link. It was a private link that you had to engage with the sponsor in order to get the link to access that content or that session. Same with like all those puppy cams, things like that are interesting. You had to engage with them so you could drive traffic that way. We did do like passport to prizes, where you have to walk around each booth and get something. And we did a lot of giveaways. In somewhat embarrassingly, in some number of our events, the giveaways pages were like the highest trafficked in a few of our shows. And you want to say everyone's there for content and they're there to learn, but man, those giveaways, they were very popular. And so don't ignore that stuff. It is important, where people are giving away Pelotons and, Yeti coolers and some pretty cool stuff that got hundreds, if not thousands of people to kind of register for them. So the same thing you might do at a booth, you can accomplish that. And I would almost say at scale, on some of these virtual platforms.
So we have a question from C, and this goes into our discussion about pricing for virtual events. And let's talk about hybrid events too, because we are starting to see some of those pop up as we have the opportunity for that in different parts of the world. And so C was asking about the pricing and saying, do you find organizations are willing to pay similar fees for virtual than they did in person? And I would take that a step further and say, let's talk about the virtual fees thing, because in the beginning, there were a lot of, totally free events, totally free. And the profit margin was in a lot of cases in the negative. There was no profit. And so what's the case now? What are you seeing now?
Chloe, you want to go first? I got a couple.
So I'll answer the first question from C. Do you find organizations willing to pay similar fees? At the moment, no. I have found over the last 6 months, it is creeping up and it's starting to be somewhere near where it might have been before. At the beginning, absolutely not. I think the future of virtual, in particular in the UK, now that we know we can't have any live events until sort of March at the earliest, is going to skyrocket because organizations know they need trade events in order to grow their pipeline, to get their brand exposure, to keep the momentum. So I think as soon as it becomes a commodity, people will pay the money for it. It's taken 6 months to get to the stage where we're almost touching similar prices, but still no. I would say, I think until around December, January, February time, we are not going to see the same amount. That's from my experience. Mike, I don't know if you got.
Yeah, and I have kind of 2 answers to that, because on one side of it, we also, on a number of our brands and our events, we charge for the attendees or the delegates, right? So you have to actually pay to access certain content. And we've actually seen it go both ways. We had some shows where you used to offer a free pass. And so for an example, a large cybersecurity event like Black Hat, we actually offered kind of a free pass. We didn't get everything, but you got some access literally for the first time ever. And so we did see some major, takers on that. And some of the numbers that we got were great, and people that got, and this is something we talk about the value of virtual events too. Sometimes you get access to people that you would never have had access to before. They can just as long as they have an internet connection, they can access your content and participate at your show. And so the number of countries skyrocketed that people participated in, just the straight up numbers and new people to our event and to our database were insanely high. For the attendee delegate side of it, we have found that people charge an hour somewhere between 30 and about 50%, sometimes upwards to 75%. I mean, depending on the price, where you already were low priced, people did go straight up for 100, 100%. Like if you were charging $6.99 and you still want to charge $6.99 to access your content because it's similar, you can still get trainings, you can get certification and things like that. We were able to maintain pricing on a few things. So I don't think there is just kind of a silver bullet or a one size fits all on it, but we did find, and through some independent consultants found that delegates are looking to spend about 30 to 50% of what they would have expected to pay for that. On the sponsorship side, we tried to push, and I think, Chloe, you talked about this earlier, the idea that, hey, even if it's the same sponsorship cost, if your gold sponsorship costs $50,000 at the live event, your gold sponsorship is $50K, because guess what? You're not paying $200,000 all in. You're really only paying $50,000. So we try to play that like, this is a discount for you because you're saving all that other stuff and still getting the value. It didn't totally fly. I think some people were with us at that. But we at least tried to say, hey, you're all in cost. Think about your all in cost to do this show and look at that number, not just the straight sponsorship to sponsorship price. But some events we were able to go up to 100% straight swap. Some were more like 50% on pricing and whatnot. But some of it had to do with the translation of value. So like big branding, like big banners and signs and lounges, that kind of stuff, you kind of had to just walk away from.
Mm-hmm.
Can you make money around content?
Yeah, I mean, the two for sure. And I think what we're finding is it's almost more valuable than we had thought in the start. We have some shows that would sell like a keynote or a main stage or opening thing, and you can get tremendous value from that. The content sessions, we've actually had kind of an internal debate now. And Chloe, I'd love your opinion on this, just in case you have an opinion on something. They're tremendously valuable in that you get quality people and high numbers of them. And so one school of thought is it should be included in these packages to make that $120,000 diamond package worth it. Or it's we should carve this out and charge through the roof for it by itself because it's so valuable. So it's like included in a package and make that valuable, or actually pull it out now and charge a high fee for it because it is so valuable.
Mike, when you say that, do you mean the speakers or do you mean
session.
the written content as well?
Yeah, this company is providing this session for 45 minutes on the schedule at 1:00, and it's a sponsored company, vendor company giving the session.
That's the one thing that blew my mind when I started seeing virtual events pop up in sort of March, April, unless that person is bringing a huge amount of value to your event in their name alone, which they can in many cases. A speaker should absolutely be paying to have a slot because that's where they're going to get the majority of their leads. I run a sales business for exhibition organizers all over the world. And the first thing I teach any of my customers is content comes first. And then, like Mike said, not only quality relationships, but a lot of them. And my favorite, long-term relationships. The way to really build customer loyalty is through good content. And so I think it's an absolute no-brainer. I think really if you are an industry event and you're the flagship industry event, you should absolutely be charging 80% of your speakers to speak and include it in their sponsorship package because they're going to get the majority of their leads through that as they would a face-to-face event. And content is key. We know that now. So yeah.
And I think, as people are building their own sponsorship packages, thinking through it, I honestly have found across the board that the event organizers, sales team, everybody has a tendency to undervalue stuff. I know it sounds crazy, but I would generally advise someone to start higher. You can discount, you can come down, you can make some sort of a deal or some reason that you're going to charge someone a little bit less maybe. But, we had a whole event that was going virtual and we were debating pricing on things. And I was arguing a higher price. They ultimately went with a lower price. And they're like, we sold out in 48 hours. And I'm like, you could have gone with the higher price. And so I think people, that confidence of valuing what you really have here is a challenge for the event organizers. Because you also you don't want nobody to show up. And if we overprice it, no one's going to come. And I think you got to get over that a bit. If you really believe in the value of what you're putting out there, you'll get the people to come with you.
You're so right, Mike. I always think, and I don't know, Kiki, you agree as well, that if you sent somebody a contract or a price and they have replied and signed immediately without any negotiation,
Yeah.
your first thought should be,
Yeah.
oh
should charge
no,
more.
I went
I
in
did
far
as
too
well.
low.
Yeah.
Yeah, because actually, because even if it's the right price, people will still negotiate. So if they
Yeah.
don't negotiate with you and they sign, it's very much the wrong price because it's
Yeah.
far too low. And actually it meets their expectations and under. So you should always, I agree with Mike, you should always aim high.
Yeah. Someone had a question on here. Alex had a question about different types of event tech platforms in the market and how easy did you find to make the tech choice to cover all your needs, monetization, engagement, etc.? Has the adoption been easy for internal users and external clients? And I guess this is the question about in choosing a tech platform. Of course, we're working with Gloria's Swap Card right now, but in choosing a tech platform, how easy has that been, and to make the tech choice, and how are you dealing with a market that has been inundated with
I'll give 2 seconds on this, Chloe. I think what in all honesty, when we were going through, we had a real quick window because we had a bunch of March events and fall events that were in March of this year. We said, we realized quickly we can't do this. So we pushed a lot of them into August and saying, hey, we'll be able to do this in August. So sometimes midsummer, when it became very obvious it wasn't safe to host these events, we probably had a good 8-9 week window to figure out how to do this virtually. And so the number one thing was, let's get a platform. But in all honesty, we built all of our sponsorship package without knowing our platform. We knew there'd be speaking and content sessions. We knew you'd have a sponsor page booth type thing. We know we'd have registration. We know we'd have some networking functionality. And we built our initial sponsor packages without knowing our vendor. And I think the major value of what you're doing online, a lot of that can be added there. We then ultimately, throughout the decision-making process, did pick Swap Card to go with. And it was a lot to do with that quality of interactions, the meeting functionality, and some of that AI matchmaking where you could see the list. And Kiki, you brought that up. You could see who's there, reach out, and not be too annoying. It had to be a two-way street to connect. And what we were honestly pleasantly surprised with was Swap Card became a value. Like the platform itself, and I put a note on this as you're selling this, find out what that secret sauce is of why they built a platform and sell that as a value. Like each platform has some philosophy or strategy on what virtual events and platforms should be. Find out what that is for that platform and exploit it. Use it as a value and teach your exhibitors how to use it. I'd say one last thing was the virtual or the mobile app, and the ability to watch on the mobile app was a big part of Swap Card as well, because we did have a good portion of people that joined on a mobile device.
So we're nearing the end of our time, and I want to give each of you a chance to just answer this last question before we jump over to roundtables, which I hope everyone joins us for. And that is, if you had to give everyone listening just one piece of advice so that they could make their upcoming virtual and hybrid events more profitable, what would that piece of advice be?
Don't take mine, Chloe.
Okay, mine would be have no fear. Back yourself. Do it and do it properly, and you will see the rewards come in. Don't be scared.
That was kind of mine. I was saying
No,
confidence.
it was not.
I was saying confidence was mine, because I think you have to remember there's two things that everyone's going through this right now. Everyone's trying to figure out answers. Everyone's having, and I refuse to use the word pivot, have to figure out, it's just used too much, figure this out. And what you present and what you guys have worked on all year for, there's tremendous value to that. Your community wants it. The vendors need it. Like there's a tremendous value to that. So have confidence that what you're doing, there is tremendous value to it, and people will come and support you. It has been a really cool experience this year to see the vendors say, hey, we're with you. We know this is hard, but we're supporting you. We got your back. This is an important community to us. It's been great to see. So for sure, have some confidence in what you're doing as it relates to pricing and how you're packaging this, because people will show up.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and for joining. I mean, gosh, you if you haven't been getting a lot out of the Swap Card Evolve series, I don't know what's going on, but Chloe, Michael, thank you so much for doing this today. I think that I speak for all of us when I say that it's been a wonderful experience, and I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. So everyone,
That's what's important, Kiki.
it is that I've learned. I'm glad that we're all, we can agree on that.
Yeah.
Please join us in the roundtables. We're going to break off and you can talk to Chloe, you can talk to Michael, you can talk to me, and we can talk more about this in the roundtables afterwards. And definitely be looking forward to the next part of the Evolve series from Swap Card. And we thank you all for joining us today.